This video is brought to you by Daddy Bercouli. Make sure to appreciate the best waifu material you will ever see in the series. Today, we had an amazing battle scene between Eugeo and Bercouli in the Great Bath of the 90th floor. It was an especially powerful episode for Eugeo, the anime's lesser favorite protagonist of the duo, who finally received some spotlight and got to showcase his creativity in Aincrad style. But his victorious draw comes at a huge price as a circle-shaped Chudelfuck appears out of nowhere to take him away. Welcome everyone, it's me Gamerturk and this is your most accurate source of Sword Art Online information, Alicization Explained, featuring episode 18, The Legendary Hero. As always, timestamps to individual plot points are in the description as well as the pinned comment for easy navigation, but huge news this week as I have finally cleared the copyright strike on my episode 8 video, bringing a majority of my videos back up and can now use scenes from the anime again. But to give you a quick rundown, we had our major fight between Bercouli and Eugeo with incredibly good attention to detail and the time constraints pushing the animators so much that we had some reused animations relayered to the bath scene instead, as well as the announcement of a recap episode next week instead of episode 19, which means I can feature my Ask Gamerturk weekly Alicization Q&A next Saturday instead of rushing for a Wednesday upload. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you're new to my Explain series, what I do here is essentially provide you all the vital information on characters, events, action, lore from the source material, light novels, things that the anime did not convey properly or just did not have the time to, so you can still see the full picture. But then again, if you want to read the books yourself for the amazing experience, Amazon and Book Depository affiliate links are in the description and the knowledge of Stacia awaits you there. Also, only 1 week left on my current SAO Light Novel giveaway, so click the link in the description and join the giveaway to win Sword Art Online Volume 14 Alicization Uniting, the end of the first half of Alicization story. But without further ado, episode 18 continued where we left off, volume 13 Alicization Dividings, chapter 10 in its entirety, and covered the first couple of pages of chapter 11 part 1 as well, so around 35 pages were adapted, lower than usual, and that leaves me not much room to talk about this week in terms of accuracy. This was an extremely accurate adaptation week, which makes me wish that they had included Eugeo's thoughts that they skipped in the last episode, but yeah, you can always check my episode 17 video for a major conflict rising in Eugeo's heart as he is becoming more and more aware that a time will come when he'll need to pick between his partner Kirito and his childhood friend Alice Tsubak. But yeah, aside from that, the episode was perfectly accurate, so that's gonna be it for this week's Alicization Explained. See you all next... oh well. Adaptation opinions it is, which will more or less include some explanations for the visual cues that you may have missed. Also, if you end up still having questions after this video or have questions about the future of the series in general, do ask them in the comments for my new weekly Alicization Q&A series, #AskGamerturk. Of course, if your question is spoilers, make sure to use, spoiler formatting, which is as simple as writing spoiler warning on top and hitting the enter button a bunch of times to ensure your question is not in sight. Patrons and channel members on YouTube will have their questions prioritized as well, so there is my shameless plug. I even recently got the feature on YouTube as well. But anyways, I really love how the episode opens up. Now here, Bercouli is using incarnate arms, a technique you will learn more about in the second half of Alicization, to bring his sword to his hand, similar to how the Force from Star Wars works. However, that is not what I love about this scene. It's how it showcases Eugeo being startled. How Eugeo starts to take steps back when Bercouli apologizes for making him wait. Eugeo realizes that he was taking steps back later down the line and stops, but this is an unconscious move on his side due to the sheer amount of confidence spreading from Bercouli, causing Eugeo to doubt his moves. You have seen similar instances before, for example back when it was Düsselbert who arrived in Rulit, and you have seen both Kirito and Eugeo feeling the effects of his sheer presence as kids even before trying to attack him. Of course, Düsselbert was enough to affect little Eugeo, who knew no better, but the fact that Eugeo, who remained more or less unfazed against the 3 Integrity Knights they had defeated so far, succumbing to Bercouli's presence without even realizing, shows you that he is on a different level than the other knights. And you will see more of this showcase of presence a lot in the future of the series as well. But we see yet another showcase of the lacking inner monologues here. Bercouli mentions that Alice became an apprentice knight about 6 years ago, and that's the reason why you see Eugeo in thoughts in the following shot. In the books, this led to another dialogue between Eugeo and Bercouli and actually answered another line of thought brought up by Kirito that was also dropped from the previous episode. In a sudden burst of Alice trying to ridicule him, Kirito had learned that Alice did have memories of attending Centauria Solstice Festival, and that meant Alice had indeed memories of not being a prisoner before she was an Integrity Knight from her life in the church. And the dialogue between Bercouli and Eugeo was supposed to give you the reason for that. Alice was taken away about 8 years ago from Rulit. According to Bercouli, she was made an apprentice knight about 6 years ago, only to become an Integrity Knight Alice Synthesis 30 long after her training as an apprentice knight just last year. This meant Alice went through the synthesis ritual not when she was taken, but 2 years after she was taken. This also meant that the first case of her memories being entirely wiped was back then when she became an apprentice knight, with possible additional quote-unquote maintenances that Integrity Knights go through from time to time to ensure their obedience. But why had she taken 2 years to be synthesized? That question in Eugeo's mind was yet to be answered, and surely the Integrity Knight Bercouli did not have the answer either. However, up next we see him mentioning that he does recognize the stance of Eugeo using a continuous attack style, which we know as combo attacks, with the skill connect as an exploitative extension of it. He mentions he fought Dark Knights using similar styles, but he makes it very clear that he does not have a distaste for the style or sees Eugeo, or even the Dark Knights for that matter, of anything less than honorable knights that need to be met with the same honor. We have seen one of the Dark Knights, Vixur ul Shasta, back in episode 15 during Fanatio's flashback scene, and the way Bercouli treats his opponents affects some future storylines incredibly, so his honorable take on the matters is not something you should gloss over and keep it in your mind instead. But yeah, the rest is pretty straightforward. Eugeo heals himself quickly thanks to the Great Bath having a lot of spatial resources in the air thanks to the steam, etc, and the rest of the battle of course. Bercouli, being the honorable knight, pretty much gave Eugeo time to chant his perfect weapon control on purpose though. He was confident of himself to beat him anyways, but even if he wouldn't, that would just mean he would have found something to learn from and improve. As shown by his words, Bercouli was never a knight who took shame in defeat. In fact, from the way he was explaining things to Eugeo, he was proud of his losses, because these losses were what made him more powerful over the 200 years he had been alive. Unlike many personalities we have met so far who were shaken by single loss and lost their confidence entirely, Bercouli took pride in both his wins and his losses, both making him more powerful. Wins added to his confidence as a swordsman, while losses added to his wisdom, which in turn also boosted his confidence as a swordsman, so he always welcomed whatever the result. And that was why he was giving Eugeo enough time to chant his perfect weapon control. He wanted to see the power that beat Eldri, Dussolbert, Fanatio, and even the cunning twins Fizel and Linel. Bercouli was genuinely surprised that Eugeo and his partner, who was not here at the moment, had survived the twins, though his surprise was dropped from the anime as usual. But yeah, going back to our current situation, Bercouli expected a long-range perfect weapon control, yeah, but he had not expected an actual plan involving creativity, considering his opponents so far, the other Integrity Knights, had sword styles that consisted of the same overpowering attacks as his. Eugeo, however, had spent enough time with Kirito to know the value of creativity. That was the core value of the Aincrad style he was using. And after using the same animation as he did back in episode 16 against Fanatio, layered over a bath scene this time around, which is just another sign of the reason behind why we're getting a recap episode next week and not the episode 19, he used all the creativity he could come up with and bamboozled Bercouli to his core. His perfect weapon control was nothing but a ruse, so was his rush with his sword. In fact, it was his sword that was a ruse. Bercouli knew he would be able to overpower Eugeo, but he didn't know that Eugeo had let go of his weapon, a taboo in sword fighting mind you, and conjured one from ice instead that would give up instantly and throw him off balance. And I love this scene so much, solely because it finally gives Eugeo some of the development he deserved since episode 4. A minor development, but for the first time we have seen Eugeo as a capable swordsman rather than being a shadow of Kirito. He had plenty of these moments in the novels, but never had any in the anime so far, but after all, there was a reason why Kirito considered Eugeo to have the potential to be better than himself. He had nigh-perfect technique and he showed incredible promise of being able to adapt and learn on his own throughout the years they spent together. And this was the culmination of it, lunging without an actual sword, trapping Bercouli inside the actual pool filled with water and freezing it all instantly with his memory release skill, unleashing the memories of a weapon entirely, which wouldn't be possible with a simple perfect weapon control. And thankfully, Cardinal explains the difference as well in the flashback scene, so maybe Foxen will listen to her since he has no intention of learning from the times I pointed out his false information. But yeah, the rest is exactly as you see, an intimate dialogue between Bercouli and Eugeo, and surprisingly we get some world building as well. As Eugeo says, your maximum health value is not determined by your level, but rather your age. It is a natural part of one's biology rather than something that can be manipulated freely. And Eugeo was a young adult, someone who was at the peak of having the highest amount of life stats in their entire lives. But he didn't know how much the slash from before had decreased his life. It was essentially a gamble. As the blue roses bloomed, they started draining the life of both Eugeo and Bercouli, and one of them would give up before the other. No way out, the duo continued their dialogue as they waited for the inevitable result of the gamble. And Eugeo's words only strengthened certain suspicions Bercouli had over the course of 200 years. Maybe he truly wasn't summoned from the heavens. But suddenly, Chudelkin the Prime Senator arrives. You can already see that Bercouli, with his honorable perspective of swordsmanship, already does not see eye to eye with the Prime Senator, who is technically above him as he is the person ruling the Axiom Church when Quinella spends her time sleeping in her chambers to save up on memory space. But you can see that despite being a higher power than him in terms of the Axiom Church hierarchy, Bercouli can go as far as opposing him. This ties in with how floodlights and rules work in general. You see, for something to be a higher power to command you, you need to truly recognize that person as someone of higher power. The taboo index is abided by because the citizens are taught by their parents that the Axiom Church is absolute and their parents are natural authority figures of one's life. However, Bercouli had long realized that Chudelkin's orders and intentions were all based on lies. While he had lacked the respect towards Chudelkin as a disgraceful human being in general, the deception had an effect on his belief of Chudelkin being a quote-unquote superior in hierarchy as well. While he still wouldn't be able to go ahead and swing his sword towards Chudelkin, the slight shift in perception was more than enough to openly disrespect and talk back at him, because the objective truth, that being Eugeo and Kirito not being from the Dark Territory, was obviously of higher authority than Chudelkin's. He was only the Prime Senator, but the reality itself was the natural authority of the world in this case, and it had deemed Prime Senator a liar in this case, giving Bercouli enough leeway to talk back at Chudelfuck. As to what happens to Bercouli, no, he is not dead, don't worry. The anime mentioned this already, but I see many people glossing over this. The command used for Bercouli is Deep Freeze, which just freezes him. Think of it the same way your smartphone handles background applications, switch from Twitter to Facebook without shutting down the app, and the file is frozen in the background despite still being alive, and you can tab back to it. The intention is to keep Bercouli out of the matters until Kirito and Eugeo are dealt with, and then send him in for quote-unquote maintenance to readjust his artificial personality and delete some of his memories that causes disobedience. As for what happens to Eugeo, you have to wait until next episode to see where he has been taken, and the episode after to see what happened to him exactly. But again, you can always ask with a spoiler formatting, and I can answer that in the spoiler section of my weekly Alicization Q&A, #AskGamerturk. Back on the ledge, however, I love the first instinct of Kirito to heat up his food is to explode thermal elements on them. Like, do I need to say again and again that Kirito is a scrub and is brute forcing everything, including his sword fighting as well as his cooking. But upon the mention of Selka, a name that Alice Synthesis 30 remembers but does not really know who she is, she goes back to questioning her past, and after Bercouli having similar thoughts, episode 19 will be when Alice starts questioning hers extensively. The dreams she kept having about the person she once most cared about. The memory that the administrator had taken from her and sealed on top of her chambers. But that brings us to the end of this week. Again, if you have questions, since next week is a recap episode, I'll be publishing my #AskGamerturk video next Saturday to replace the usual Alicization Explained, so ask those questions in the comments and make sure to follow spoiler formatting if you have spoilery questions. Questions from patrons and channel members will be prioritized for the answer if I receive too many questions, that is, like last week. But yeah, episode 19, which is currently unnamed due to having a recap episode in between, will feature Alice questioning her past and the repercussions of questioning her past against the will of the Axiom Church, and of course the fate of Eugeo after being taken by Prime Senator Chudelfak. So hold your breath for one additional week, and we will be approaching to Volume 14 Alicization Uniting more and more. Speaking of, yeah, one last week to enter my Alicization Uniting Light Novel giveaway, so click the link in the description to join up. And if you wanna get the Alicization Light Novels or anything SAO related really, spin-off light novels like Alternative Eugeo, Alternative Clover's Regret, progressive or manga like Project Alicization, Girls Ops, or even the games, Book Depository and Amazon affiliate links will be in the description that allows you to support my channel at no additional cost. But if you made it this far, comment time-piercing sword of Daddy Bercouli in the comments to let me know. Ask your questions to be featured in weekly Alicization Q&A, and subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified for more on Sword Art Online Alicization. Thank you very much for watching, and a huge thanks to my patrons and hopefully future channel members as well. I'll see you next week, stay cool.